freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same. And if you and I don't do this, then you and I may well spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it once was like in America when men were free.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode number 406 of Gun Freedom Radio, where we engage, we educate, and we inform. We are brought to you by azfirearmsauctions.com, where you set the price on guns, ammo, and accessories. I am one of your hosts, Cheryl Todd.
And I'm the other guy, Dan Todd. Our theme today is Stop the War on Children. And our guest is Seak Smith. Seak is a wife, mother of three, a patriot, a fierce warrior for children, and the founder of Mom and Dad Army. Mom Army is a survivor-led organization with a mission to activate and unite millions of mama bears and their allies in the battle to stop the war on children and their innocence. Mom's Army vision is a world where children feel safe, loved, protected, and honored. In the first 9 months since her launch on Instagram, Mom Army has grown into 25 chapters across America, Canada, the UK, and Australia.
Well, welcome to the show, busy lady Seak Smith.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So this started as an Instagram page?
It did. Yeah, it did.
Boy, if that doesn't tell you the passion and the hunger that is out there, that you have grown in 9 months from, hey, I'm making this Instagram page to talk about the horrors that are happening to our next generations, to now having, 25 chapters internationally included?
Yeah.
This is craziness, but thank goodness somebody stepped up to the call, and that somebody is you.
So I want to know if I can. So, I think kids, they wake up, they go to school, they're loved, they go home, they have dinner, and they read a book and go to bed. What's this war on children?
Well, it's crazy, to go back to why the page started. And I'll go back even further. I've been very active as an advocate fighting child sex trafficking for almost 15 years. So that's been my space and my work for a very long time. And that includes everything from protests to awareness campaigns to fundraisers, you name it. But more recently, as of last year, I started to see this intensity and relentless attacks on our children. And what I mean by that is that it was coming from every part of society and every institution, whether it's the education system that's indoctrinating our children with these ridiculous ideologies and poisoning their young minds, to, entertainment and what they're watching on television and on social media and big tech and the medical establishment. I mean, it goes on and on and on. And I was having this sense of overwhelming feeling that there's something different that's happening. There's been this shift of coming after our children very blatantly. And that was what started this. And I corralled my network and friendships from across the country to say, hey, we need to be unified in how we address this and how we speak against this. And that was the start of Mom Army. It was literally, hey, ladies, let's come together. Let's talk about this in a more uniform manner. And we launched Mom Army August 8th of last summer.
Wow.
Awesome.
So that'd be 2022.
Yep.
So some of this, I just wonder if some of this happened because of COVID and us having to see each other on screens so much that maybe it made us more aware. I know with schools, it made me so much more aware of what the classroom content even was, even if it's not something nefarious or bad. What do you ascribe anything to why this seems to be escalating in the way that it does? Because I agree with you, it does feel that way.
You hit the nail on the head, and we know this anecdotally just within our members and our groups and our leaders. A lot of the moms in our group came to terms with what was actually going on during COVID. They were paying attention, like you said, parents were seeing what was going on in the classrooms through their Zooms and through all of these things, and they didn't like what they saw. And you started to see groups like Moms for Liberty sprout up during that time, and there's Moms for America and other local groups all over the country. And I think what we bring to the table, I always say, like, stay in your lane, do what you're good at. And, there's all these wonderful groups doing incredible work out there, bringing attention to these issues. But I think what the space that we occupy is that we are a survivor-led organization, that more than half of our members are survivors of child sexual abuse, even trafficking, other childhood traumas. So they bring a very unique perspective in the fact that they don't want what happened to them to happen to other children. So they fight in a very different way. It's putting it nicely. I mean, these moms are very fierce when it comes to the protection of children, and not just their children. A lot of our moms, their children are safe. A lot of them homeschool their kids. A lot of them, some have adult children already. But what they are fearful of is the next generation and how the next generation is coming up,
And that's
the
scary.
future that we have for them.
It's scary, Seek, because it looks like they're trying to normalize younger sex with kids. I mean, they're doing it in schools, and it's almost like they're making it, well, that's normal for kids 7, 8 years old to be curious about sex, and they're throwing it, and they're feeding it, and they're throwing it at them, and it's scary to me, because what's next? Then adults think that it's going to be okay to have sex with children because it's normal. I'm scared, to be honest with you. After watching that,
you're not far off. You're not far off from your assessment, because anything in society, when we talk about this in a culture war sense, right? And it's the influence of society and our culture and entertainment and everything that we are consuming, and how we're raising the next generation, is that it seemingly feels like it's coming out of nowhere, but this has been at play for many, many decades. This has been the plan all along, is to infiltrate, especially our education system, to normalize a lot of these topics. We, in our mission, we talk about protecting children's innocence. That's a really intentional part of our mission. I am a believer that children should have their innocence protected for as long as possible. I have a 12-year-old who still sleeps with teddy bears, and she's crocheting, and she's, playing board games with her older brothers, and she's watching, I think the other day they were watching, or I forget what TV show, but she likes to watch like Full House, like old classic television shows, and what they're putting in front of children's faces, what they're essentially, I'm losing my train of thought, but basically what they're shoving down our children's throats, right? Children, they're, especially in schools, they're a captive audience. They can't just get up and leave if something is being taught that maybe the parents don't approve of, or or the child feels very uncomfortable around. This is being forced upon them, and it is poisoning their minds, because children, developmentally, children aren't prepared or ready to have these very adult conversations. And I think that is such a crime on children. And you're seeing it based on the confusion children are experiencing, the anxiety. I mean, COVID already, created an uptick in depression and loneliness and anxiety and isolation. And then you add the layers of these very, very adult, topics in front of children. And then here we are, we've got a mental health crisis.
So I'm sorry, but not everybody can homeschool. And so what is a parent to do?
Yeah. So I think on that front, I think this is where Mom Army has really been a facilitator of some of this stuff, is parents are asking the question, what do I do? I'm not okay with what's happening. I'm outraged about it. And so we always advise people to start organizing, to start talking to your neighbors, talking to other parents in the school, figuring out how do you address these grievances, going to the school board meetings, making your voices heard. It's scary, because a lot of times what we're seeing right now is we have an environment, especially from our government, our federal government, of labeling parents as terrorists and then attacking parents for voicing their opinion. So it's a scary time to speak up, but if we don't speak up now, what is a year from now going to look like? What is 5 years from now going to look like? If it's gotten this bad so far, if we don't do something about it, we're going to be on a really terrible course.
Yes, it's coming
So
quick.
I would say get activated, get involved, get activated. If it's not Mom Army, join other groups that are aligned with your, with your values and your mission, and even if it's not your children, like I said, we have a lot of moms in our group who are homeschool moms. So they're speaking up to protect other children as well.
That's exactly right. And, you were talking about you've been fighting child sex trafficking for 15 years. I mean, I can remember it was maybe, I don't know, 5, 6 years ago, one of our guests came on and she said something about, sex trafficking and sex slavery and stuff like that. And at the time, I was kind of thinking, well, this sounds a little far-fetched. Like we're in, the word slavery just doesn't even interact in our modern society. And now I feel like I need to go back and talk to her again because she was on the forefront of this. She already had her finger on the pulse, as you did. And people out there that are still saying, oh, this is just some kind of weird far right conspiracy theory. The UN, the United Nations, has weighed in on this, not to say, let's protect the children of the world, but the exact opposite, to say, let's remove any legal barriers to interacting sexually with minors and littles. And it's mind-blowing to me. I really feel like we're living in upside down land.
Yeah, I mean, I know exactly what you're talking about. It's the legal recommendation that the UN put out last, I believe, October, about this very topic. And I think what is so hard for the general public to wrap their heads around is that pedophilia is actually very rampant. It's been rampant throughout history. When you talk about incest, when you talk about, sexual violence against children, it has existed all throughout time. What has happened is that, in the modern age, we don't think of it as slavery when it is. When you're talking about coercion, when you're talking about threats of violence, when you're talking about threats on people's lives to coerce them and then to profit off of children, when it comes to this in this very violent and egregious manner, it is slavery. And we just, in a modern society, we don't think of slavery in that way, but it is essentially sexual slavery on children, especially. And that's the area that I focus on, because when you sexually violate a children, and when these perpetrators do that, you destroy a child. They will never be the same ever again. And that's coming from working with survivors. I've done healing retreats for survivors. We have somebody in our group who was trafficked by her own father from the age of 4 to 17, mostly at Disney World and on the East Coast. Her dad was part of a pedophile ring on the East Coast. And so she was trafficked from Florida all the way up to Maine. And she's younger than me. So this is happening all over America, in our neighborhoods, in our backyards, and we don't even know it. We think of it as some third world country thing, which I used to think too. I'm from Cambodia, and I used to think that child sex trafficking was rampant in Cambodia because families are poor and, they're sacrificing one kid so they can feed the other kids. It's flipped. It's really such a huge problem here, and we are not addressing it.
I'm going to trip this up, I'm sure, because it goes deep. But so we see on the news where parents are saying, my 3-year-old wants to be a man, and because this or that, and they're letting them do that. And then now they're normalizing sex for younger generations. And you put all that together, and I think it's what the UN is thinking about, is let's take away the criminal part of an adult having sex with a child. And
if a child that young can consent
to having a sex change, then why can't they consent to having sex? So scary. And some people need to be removed from this earth.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, and I think that's again, that's the hard part to wrap our heads around. It has been, when we talk about slippery slope, right? You introduce one concept to a society, you condition them to that, right? So they're basic grooming society to accept certain things, right? All of a sudden now there's a whole sector of society that says, oh, it's fine for adults to dress as grown men to dress as women, gyrating in front of children. What's the problem with that? It's inclusivity, it's acceptance, it's all these things. It's love is love. And the rest of us are mortified. We're like, heck no, this is really, I mean, we wouldn't put a child at a strip club and you wouldn't have a stripper dancing in front of a child. So why is it okay for a grown man to dress as a woman gyrating in front of a child? And so to your point about them, allowing children to consent to things that we would have never thought of 5-10 years ago, all of a sudden it's like, oh, kids can make decisions on this. So a child can decide he's a girl, at 3 years old. We have a case we're working on right now with a gentleman named Adam Baina, whose ex is transitioning their 5-year-old son. But when you give consent in these areas, but then a 25-year-old you can't rent a car until you're 25. You
Right.
can't join the military until you're 18. You can't, do this until you're 18. But a 3-year-old can decide he's a girl and born in the wrong body, which there's no such thing. A child is not born in the wrong body. And, in Adam's case in California, what's happening there is we say Adam's son was not born in the wrong body. He was born in the wrong state. There are 17 states that are against this and passing laws to rectify and make it illegal to transition children medically, chemically. So in Adam's son's case, Aiden, he was not born in the wrong body. He was born in the wrong state.
There's not a kid, I would say up to 16, 17 years old, maybe even 18, that couldn't be convinced of anything by, influencing them or whatever. And the kids, their minds aren't developed. They're not, they don't have the experience to make decisions like that. And for parents or adults to do that to children, that's criminal as far as I'm concerned.
Adults in
Right.
their 30s, 40s and beyond that are so suggestible, that are so easily influenced. Imagine, the trust that littles have in us.
Yeah.
We're supposed to guide them, right? Mentor them and, lead them through their exploratory phases, right? My degrees are in psychology and it's normal for kids to try on different personalities and try on different ways of expressing themselves.
My neighbor thought he
And
was a
then to
dog.
lock it in
3-year,
surgically and medically
Yes.
at such a young age is, you're robbing them of, we don't even know what.
Yeah, it's all experimental. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's the other part of this that's so criminal. It's that there is no long-term studies on any of this, not even for the adults that are transitioning. We're finding out through our network, we have some friends who are trans who are regretting their transition as adults. So what we're doing to children, we haven't even, we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg. That wave of regret is coming in a few years. And we are speaking up in the boldest, most, straightforward way to say, this is not okay. This is criminal. I always tell our team to use frank language, to use bold, truthful language. When the other side says, oh, this is affirmative care, it's not. It is the mutilation and sterilization of children. It is not affirmative care. So we have to be brave enough to use truthful language when we're talking about these issues that are I talk about it in terms of, this is the new Joseph Mengele. It's the experiment of children that is happening right before our eyes.
We don't need any kind of experiments or long-term studies. That's just a no. That's just a no. You don't mess around with the kids like that. You just
let the
don't.
child come to adulthood and then figure out their own path. This strange thing where parents are, I don't know. It really feels like Munchausen syndrome.
Yeah, there's a huge element of that,
where it's like my issue, but I'm putting it on my child, or it's like the latest thing.
Yeah, we've heard stories where moms were like, I really wanted a girl. I they were hoping for a girl, and then they have a boy and they're transitioning their boy to it. I mean, we've heard stories like that. And our group, what we're doing is we fight it on every front. Last weekend, our team in San Diego were out protesting the Pediatric Endocrine Society, which is the group of doctors that prescribe puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones and things like that to children. So it was us, along with our friend Erin Friday, who runs an organization called Our Duty. So we were out there protesting that group. We've also protested the American Academy of Pediatrics, because they go by the WPATH policy of, when a child comes into the pediatrician's office gender confused, you fast track them basically to a gender clinic. So there's no other policy that's in place. It's, if a child says, I think I'm a boy, then you send them to a gender clinic and you basically get them on the track of puberty blockers and all the things that lead up to transitioning. There is nothing to counter that. They call it conversion therapy, but to me, this is the biggest conversion therapy possible. If a child is gay and you're converting him to being a girl, that is the biggest conversion you could ever do on a child.
Well, Danny likes to tell a story of somebody he knew when he was young.
He was like 3 or 4 years old.
One of the neighborhood kids.
He wanted to be a dog. And so the parents said, oh,
What's very imaginative.
Yeah, right. And he was a dog for a while. He ate out of a dog bowl, and he was a dog.
But, it was nowadays. And so the parents would say, instead of, my son thinks he's a girl, my son wants to be a dog. I need to go and have the surgery or the what, that makes us laugh at the ridiculousness of it. But yet this other stuff, we're just supposed to nod and smile and accept it as gospel. And the people that you've talked about that are adults who went through a transition, and now they're saying, you know what, that really wasn't the right thing for me. That wasn't really what was troubling me. And now I want to detransition. The fact that their voices are being squelched, and that we're not able to have free access to hearing their stories and at least considering that side of this equation, that right there should tell every one of us exactly what is going on. We are being marshaled an agenda. There's an agenda, and we're being funneled.
But why?
To one conclusion.
But why?
Just like we were with all the COVID stuff and all the masking stuff and all the vaccine stuff.
Why can't they hear both sides? Why?
A lot of money.
A lot of money. Thank you.
Money.
Follow the money.
Yeah. If you follow the money, you'll start to really understand there is so much money being pumped into this ideology from international organizations, from Planned Parenthood, from the UN, it's coming from every direction. And you can see it in the corporations. When we sit here and go, well, why is Bud Light pushing this? Why is Levi's pushing this? Why is Target pushing this? There's so much money. And when you can get a child on hormone blockers, they become a patient to the pharmaceutical companies for life. For life, the testosterone and everything. So a lot, and it's hard to wrap our heads around it because it sounds so sadistic. It sounds very cynical, very sinister. And normal human beings like us who are compassionate and caring and thoughtful don't understand that kind of evil thinking. And all we have to do is look back to history, right? When Cheryl, you talk about, they're just getting us to accept this and to quell our voice, and we can't speak up against it. Think about slavery time, when the abolitionists were speaking up against slavery, and how hard that must have been to go against an entire system that was already put in place to make slavery legal, right? Just because something is legal doesn't make it moral, right? So what's happening right now, I compare it to those type of historical events, because for those of us that see that this is morally reprehensible, we all need to speak up.
Absolutely.
Well, I just curious about, 3-4 year old kid, that's a boy that wants to become a girl. He had to be influenced. I mean, he didn't wake up one day and say, I want to be a girl. He had to be influenced in some way or another. And I don't know if it's the media, the teachers, the parents, or what, but somebody is feeding this into these young people's heads.
Yeah.
And that's scary.
Well, we were kind of talking about that Munchausen by proxy, where, if parent get some satisfaction or something fed inside of them if their child is sick in some way, right? And they're constantly at the doctor and that sort of thing. So there's a similarity here, I think, for some people. And it could be as individual as the family, as individual as the person. But the fact is that I don't see the rush. Let's just slow down the rush. Let's let kids get to be adults. And then the medical conglomerate will be there with their scalpels and their medications and their injections, just waiting. But
well, what's really interesting too is when you're, we get sent intel from all over the country, and when I wake up to my DMs, a parent will send me something's going on in their school and this is happening, and they'll send me documents and things like that. But what is really interesting in this ideological, debate we have right now is that the side that's supporting this transition of children is also the same side that says you shouldn't charge 25-year-olds with murder because they didn't know what they were doing. So
Right.
in Maine, they're trying to pass a bill to say you can't hold anybody under 25 responsible for murder because they just didn't have the wherewithal, in their decision making. But yet a 5-year-old can transition and become the opposite sex. So it's very contradicting in terms of their thought process. We're being very consistent on our side. We're saying, hey, if it's a child, they shouldn't be making any of these life-changing decisions whatsoever.
So it's just
Exactly.
chaos. They're just
Yeah.
supporting chaos.
Yeah.
Take away our family morals.
By design,
Yeah.
I honestly believe that the chaos that they're, pushing out there, for all of society is by design because it distracts us from doing the things that are really, really important. We've got a failing economy. There's so much going on in this. We're losing our freedoms left and right. When you talk about the Second Amendment, it's throwing us all into chaos so that we're all distracted in all these other areas. And then we forget to really unite to fight for what is truly, an American ideal, which is freedom.
Exactly. So getting back to how young your organization is. So Mom Army is where it started. Now you've already expanded to Dad Army, or did they come out at the same time?
Different times we were starting to get messages of support from, across the country with Mom Army. And then we started getting messages from the men and the fathers going, hey, what about us? We really support what you're doing, but how do we, and right away, my husband, who is very much just a male version of me, so we talked about it, saying that there needs to be a place for men to speak up and be very active in this area. And it's starting small, but we've got a very active group of very strong protectors of women and children out there who don't like what they see going on, are wanting to speak up, are wanting to find ways to really create change, and bringing and changing the culture. The focus of Dad Army is really getting the culture, changing culture. So a lot of our Dad Army messaging and a lot of the things that the guys are working on is restoring the family, restoring the role of fathers, restoring the role of strong men in society, because for so long, our society has diminished men, calling it toxic masculinity, when masculinity is very healthy because we need masculine men to protect women and children.
Absolutely. So what are some of the challenges that you're experiencing? I'm sure there's highs and lows, right? There's great things and frustrating things, but to manage and organize and lead an organization that's growing so quickly and in so many different areas of not only our country, but other countries.
I would say there's a couple of challenges. There's one, I think, there's this climate of censorship and there's this climate of fear that's being placed upon us from our government, honestly, especially through COVID. We all saw how hard it was to speak up. So that there's an extension of that fear that's going into this area to protect children as well. So there's a challenge with that. We actually had our team meeting this morning. We talked about how do we help inspire and help support people who, are teetering and maybe a little afraid and timid about speaking out. And so that's one challenge, it's just supporting people who know what's going on is wrong, who sees it and who wants to speak out, and finding ways to support them in a way that aligns with them, right? Because people are afraid of losing their jobs and losing their livelihoods, and people have lost friends and families, over having some of these positions and these stands. So that's one challenge. And so our whole mission is to meet people where they're at. We all realize that it took us different parts of our journey to get to this point. So we have to give grace and allow people to come to this in the way that feels right for them. And so as frustrating as it feels, like all this crazy stuff is happening to children, why aren't more people speaking up? We realize we have to allow people to come to this in the timing that makes sense for them. So that's one challenge. The other challenge is, we're not funded by anybody, and so there's the financial challenge of growing an organization like this, but it's been driven by people's pure passion to protect children. It's been driven by their volunteerism and their need to live in their purpose. And so we are very fortunate in that area. So the other challenge is, getting our message out just because of funding purposes. So social media works to some extent. We get censored heavily. So the censorship is a challenge. We get shadow banned. We used to, I'll give this number to give you a comparison. When we started, we were about 2,500 followers on Instagram, and we would maybe get 1,000 people viewing our stories. Now at almost 23,000 followers, we're lucky if we get 400 people viewing our stories. Huge difference because of the shadow ban.
So we have people like Instagram and YouTube and all that are saying that protecting our children is not good.
Which is ironic and interesting because that's where you started this. And
Yeah.
so, the fact that this is where it began should tell Instagram something right there. But there's such a heavy push, this cultural push, this, I think it's probably
it's two extremes, right? They're censoring people like us who are speaking out against the harms against children, but the pedophiles are being protected. We've seen pages that have egregious content that are vile and criminal, and we could go and report it, and we'll get a message back from Instagram going, oh no, but they didn't violate any community guidelines, so it's fine, it stays up. But then we get taken down for posting something like the definition of mama bears got taken down. We got a strike for that.
What?
Yeah.
So what?
I have a screenshot. I can send you the screenshot on that.
Yeah, I have to see that. The definition of mama bears. How can that be controversial? Holy cow.
We were inciting violence. That was the violation.
That's just nuts. So where can the Mom Army create the biggest change and impact against this and stop this war on children?
I think where we've been the most effective is we've created an organization that allows for local activism. So our Charlotte, North Carolina chapter leader, Lisa, is very focused on certain things that are happening on the ground there. So there's a lot of freedom in our group. There's not one uniform way to be part of Mom Army. So that has really been an asset to what we do. But the areas that we focus on, there's school board meetings that we go and support. We don't lead school board meetings. We usually tend to support the local mom groups or local parent groups that are on the ground, like we did in Peoria. I went to meet with the parent group in Peoria before
Arizona.
We showed up to speak at their school board meeting. So we're always working in tandem with the local groups. So that's one way that we're effective. The protests are very effective because it brings more attention and awareness to the issue. So we're always locking arms with other organizations that are protesting. So we're not necessarily the ones leading the protest. The one big protest that we did lead on was the Balenciaga protest back in December. We coordinated a 20-city nationwide protest against Balenciaga, Nordstrom, and Bloomingdale's. But the two main areas that I think we can be the most effective in, where I think a lot of our focus is going to now, is legislation and litigation. We call it our 2 Ls. So legislatively, we have a lot of our leaders going to testify at Senate hearings and things like that, and backing bills that are going to make these type of changes. On the litigation side, we're partnered with Ryan Heath, who runs the Gavel Project here in Arizona. And so he's taken on a lot of lawsuits to right a lot of these injustices, especially when it comes to, he calls himself the anti-woke nonprofit. And so he's going after these ideologies that are very harmful to society, especially very harmful to children. So we work very closely with Ryan. He's on our advisory council. I think that's what's been done very effectively with Mom Army, is we've brought together some of the greatest minds and advocates for children to work together. So we have an advisory council that consists of Landon Starbuck from Freedom Forever in Nashville. She runs an anti-child exploitation organization, anti-trafficking organization, does a lot of investigative work against like the Children's Hospital in the area. Jamie from Gays Against Groomer is a coalition partner, so we work very closely with them on a lot of our initiatives. We worked with them on the Balenciaga protests. So that's where we find that we are making the biggest change, is that we're a big tent umbrella group where we bring in a lot of other organizations. We may have disagreements in some areas, but we agree in this area. We agree in the protection of children, which is why I'm so excited to be, partnered with the DZ Project and all the wonderful work you're doing there.
Well, thank you for that. And you are such an incredible addition to what we're doing here with the DC Project and the collaboration between our two groups. And, you mentioned Ryan Heath is on your advisory council. So obviously it's important to have people who think out of the box, who think creatively, who see opportunities in your inside circle. And you have stepped up and agreed to be on my advisory committee with the DC Project. And I think that the synergy of that is just going to be amazing as we are staying, as you said, staying in our own lanes, right? But yet collaborating and working together. So can you
I'm honored to be part of that. Very honored that you asked.
Thank you. Can you kind of compare and contrast, like how does it fit in your world, in your mind, to also be part of a group like the DC Project? Since we really, our lane is the Second Amendment. We're really not in the child sex trafficking lane. How do those work together in your mind?
Well, for me, it was a no-brainer. It was automatic, right? When you think of the Second Amendment and you think of our freedoms when it comes to the Second Amendment, that is our first line of defense. Especially as a woman, I'm from California, so it's not a gun culture state, and moving to Arizona, it's been a little bit of a culture shock, when it comes to gun rights. But it's so important because that is how, as women, we can equalize and be protectors, be first line defense for our children and our families, right? I mean, if my husband's away at work or he's somewhere else, I need to feel confident in protecting my family. And the Second Amendment is so vital to that right and that protection of our children. So that's where I see the crossover.
Well, we see the government is not helping to protect our children. If you take our guns away, then the government will have free reign to do whatever they want. And so they tie in really close together, in my opinion. Really close.
It's wonderful. And we met for the first time at the big Second Amendment rally that I helped to organize on the lawn of our Arizona State Capitol building in February. And I was so excited to learn about you and what you're doing. And one of our speakers even was Craig Sawman Sawyer, and he has the Veterans for
Child Rescue.
Child Rescue. And so there's another group that they have their own lane, their own mission, but it all works together. And I think that's what we can amplify.
Yeah, Veterans for Child Rescue is a coalition partner of ours. So we have people on our advisory council that are part of different groups and different organizations that come in and advise us and help guide us and keep us on the right track with our mission. And then we have coalition partners. So a lot of them are nonprofits that we align with, and we're there to support, because Mom Army is not a nonprofit. That was on purpose. We are actually a business. So we're member-based, and for different reasons. I wanted the freedom to do more and be more effective. When you become a 501c3, there's limitations to some of the things you can do. And so that's one of the reasons. And the other reason is we wanted to be self-funded. We really wanted to create an infrastructure that allows us to fund what we're doing from a business perspective.
I think that was very wisely thought out, because there are always those trade-offs and those limitations. Like, all right, so you can, donations can be written off on somebody's taxes, but then look at all the things that you've got a hand clamped over your mouth that you can't do.
Yeah, the 501 is controlled by the government, which is controlled by the IRS, and they could pretty well tell you can't do something if they want to.
Exactly.
That is sick.
So as we start winding down, I just want to touch back again, especially having this fierce daddy bear here and Papa Bear. He's a grandpa now. We're grandparents. Who are your dads in your dad army?
Yeah. It's really interesting. If I have to take a quick little survey right now, as I think about everyone, a lot of them are military, a lot of them are law enforcement. Makes a lot of sense, because those are the protectors of women and children. But a lot of them are just, some of them are not dads. We actually have quite a few people in our groups that aren't parents themselves, but they have the mama bear, papa bear energy. But a lot of them are just sick and tired of what's going on, and they want to do something. And they chose mom and dad army to be the vehicle and to be the vessel of their activism to protect children.
Well, I love that, and I think
I would go to jail. I'm seriously.
No, I know. I'm laughing because I'm nervous because it's so true.
Just
all
stay
our
away
dads
from
say the same
Stay
thing.
away from my grandkids and stay away from my friends' kids, because I will go to jail. And I guess I'd gladly go, because that's not going to happen in my family.
Yeah.
Not without.
I used to jokingly say at the beginning of this, I said, the moms are the ones rising up and fighting and at the forefront and in the front lines of this. I said, but when the dads get involved, it's going to get really serious, because the moms are doing it in a way where, but when the dads get involved, you've crossed the line. And that's how I see it.
It's funny, like women in guns are making the industry grow. Okay. Because women they speak, they talk, they tell their friends. Guys, it's like, if something happened to my grandkids, or I would try to do it so nobody would know. Okay. But people involved are going to know. I mean,
go there,
it's so we're quiet, but yet don't push. Don't push, because there's certain big stick.
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting you brought that up, because Philip, who's part of our dad army, he's a new addition to dad army. He spoke at the Peoria school board meeting, and he said in his testimony and in his public comment that I'm a father first. If you basically he says there is no law that's going to stop me when it comes to protecting my child. And he made that very clear and concise in that public hearing. And I was like, that's exactly it. That's what the dads are. They are not going to put up with this crap.
Right.
No, exactly. And I think that just hearing strong voices, whether they're male or female, that will encourage the next person. This whole thing that's happening at the Peoria School District in Arizona, like only 2 people on their school board voted to say, look, at this age, and probably at any age, we need separate bathrooms. People are already vulnerable. There are already assaults that happen in public restrooms that we just never even hear about. So we just need separate bathrooms. And only 2 people stood up for that. Yeah. And the others basically are saying, no, it's totally cool that we have adolescent boys, and probably the teachers are allowed in there too, right? So adult males in with young girls. And it's just craziness to me. So I love that there are people that draw those lines, they hold to them, and they say, not on my watch. I will not give quarter to this kind of craziness and nonsense. And the people on the school board that are like, oh, no, it's totally fine for everybody to share the same bathroom. They're not living in spineless.
What the frick are they doing on our school board? What are they doing on our school board?
Well, they ran and they got elected. How come more of us aren't doing that?
Yeah, this is where we need to rise up. Yeah, this is where you start to do recalls. This is where you start to run candidates that align with your values. This is where you start to look at, other means of rectifying this. There's in Charlotte, North Carolina, our team is working on like a city ordinance, so you have to attack this and remedy this from every which way possible. It's not just one way, you have to attack this and fix this from every angle.
This shouldn't even be an issue with the school board.
I know.
These things should not even be an issue.
Well, they are.
I agree. But we've got radicals that are placed in these positions to make these decisions on our behalf. Again, they're supposed to be representing the community and the parents, and yet they're going against. I guarantee you, if you take a survey of that school district, I can guarantee you 90% of parents are against it.
Oh,
90.
Sure.
Yeah, but they're not going to do that. They don't want to know what the community actually thinks about this.
No, and that's always been the case. I mean, going way back to taking prayer out of school, there was really, it boiled down to one very loud vocal woman who made such a stink that everybody started getting all spineless and jellyfish and caved to it. And, you know, you can just see that happen over and over and over again. And for the fear of us being called an ist, right? A racist, a
Something.
sexist, a whatever, we just cave in on ourselves and have allowed craziness to run rampant. So we need to start wrapping
No,
up.
I have to ask her something.
Go ahead.
You're amazing. Okay. But
Oh.
what made you do this? What made you get involved?
You know, if I had to really pinpoint, you know, because for a long time I didn't understand, like, why am I so hell bent on you know, doing the work that I do? Like, why is it such a part of me? And I realized going back, my dad escaped genocide and communism in the 70s from Cambodia. And when I started to understand my dad's story and his history and our family's history, it started to make sense why I'm such a fighter. It's been passed down in my DNA. I don't know any other way to exist except to be in this fight. And this is the hill I'm going to die on. I will always, always fight to protect the innocence of children. It's just, I don't know any other way to live.
Well, thank you for that.
That was a perfect question. Thank you for that. Which really kind of trumps my final question. I was going to kind of wrap all this together. But you know, there's groups out there and voices out there and school board members out there that purport to speak for all of us. And then on the gun side, the freedom side, there are these moms who demand action. That's their name. Moms demand action. Whatever.
That sounds like something you'd see in Las Vegas on the strip.
I know.
On the street.
Really bad.
Mom
name.
demand action.
But they
I'm sorry.
This
is what it sounds like. It sounds like.
But they purport to speak for all moms, right? Because it's moms demand action. Women demand this action to say that guns are bad, those who own guns are bad, and they don't speak for me.
No.
And you have stood up to say that all this crazy ideology, that these people don't speak for you. What we demand is our constitutional rights, and we have used grassroots advocacy and activism to do that. What do you say to those moms, whether it's the anti-gun rights or whether it's these others? What do you say to those people that are just being wrong-headed?
Yeah, going back to constitutional rights, right? When you talk about the Second Amendment, it's so crazy because I'm learning more. Like, I've always had I'm an avid, you know, supporter of our Constitution, you know, especially coming from a communist country. I understand how fragile our freedoms are and how easily they can be stripped away from us. But from the constitutional rights standpoint, we have a 14th Amendment parental rights, you know, so there we have, and it's not from the government. Our parental rights are God-given, right? We have a God-given right to raise our children the way we see fit, you know, with our values, with our morals, with our teachings, and our, you know, our way of thinking. So just as that demand, you know, for action, parents have their belief system, I have my right to teach my children that the Second Amendment is something that they should preserve, you know, that freedom of speech is something that they should fight for. So we have the freedom and the rights, constitutional rights, to raise our children however we see fit.
I love it. And our Constitution and our Bill of Rights, they protect rights. They don't give us our rights.
Yeah.
And they protect rights that are given to us by this very nature that we are living and breathing. They were given to us by our Creator.
Well, the other part too is, you know, I hate when people call America a democracy, because we're not. We're a constitutional republic. It is to protect the individual rights of the person. So you don't get a majority rule and majority mob rule to impose their, I don't care if it's 51% that believe this crap. You don't get to infringe on my rights as an individual.
Exactly. I love that.
What are we going to do to calm me down?
I know. We're going to have to go.
This was a great interview.
And hug our grandbabies.
A great interview, and I'm so glad you were on the show today. But
Thank you.
I'm walking away from this thing angry that we live that we have to that we have to go to the school boards and we have to go to our congressmen. It's a shame. It's just,
Yeah.
I'm just angry.
And just to close it out, when you said that you're angry, I said good for a reason, because that's the first step to taking action. And also, I think what we need to really alert the public about is we are at war, this fifth generation of war. It's a war that we are not aware we are in. So we need to let people know that we are in this war that we're not aware of. And we have to proceed accordingly. And being angry is the first step to fighting back.
I love that. And of course, I see this so much on the spiritual plane. It feels like spiritual warfare is so thick you could cut it with a knife. I've never felt it the way that it is now. And whether you're a believer or not a believer, I don't think that it should be offensive for me to invoke the spiritual nature
you're
of
absolutely
this.
right. Yeah. I on the spiritual side, what they are doing is separating the soul from the body, especially on the transgender issue. They're teaching our children to disconnect from their body, to remove the soul from that.
So true. All right. Tell folks how they can continue. All the people that are feeling like Dan right now and they want to connect with other people and know how to use their voice. Tell folks how they can follow all the work that you do.
Well, right away, if you can go to our website, is mom-army.com. So mom-army.com. And then on Instagram, we're the.momarmy, the.dadarmy. DM me, connect with me. We are happy to find a place for you, whatever that looks like in the fight to protect children and to stop the war on children.
I love it. Thank you so much for all you do. I am blessed and honored to call you my friend.
Same here. Thank you, guys.
See, I wish we could have done a 3-hour interview to calm me down.
I know.
You did awesome. Thank you very much.
That energy somewhere very useful for you. I promise you that.
I like it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a good.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
My gosh. And you think about, what do they do to people that get caught child trafficking and stuff like that? What are they out of jail the same day?
Gosh, I don't even know that piece of it, but I keep thinking, it used to be, like politically, it was suicide if you got caught having an affair. And then there were all these times where it's like, well, this person somehow, some way, they found out the person had child porn on their personal computer or something. So obviously that's the end of everything. And so it's like, so what if, how does all that translate to what we're seeing now? Yeah. The whole thing is so confusing, and it has flipped so quickly that it can't have happened organically. There's just absolutely no way that you could convince me that it just happened.
Remember when they had that Catch a Predator show? Mm-hmm. And it got really good reviews and it was good, and now I don't think it goes on anymore because it's probably too normal. Isn't that
so
sick?
Gross. Yeah. All right. We have got to get on.
Hey, my brother's on there, no, it's sick. It's sick. And
the latest reality TV star.
Yeah, right.
Predator.
It's
so
sad.
Gross.
Yeah. Anyway,
all right. Well,
we got to pray for the children. But we got, what we need to pray for? We need to pray for the parents that are
caught up in this.
Either caught up in good or caught up sick, that they're making decisions that are the wrong decisions.
Exactly. I agree with you. Well, thank you so much to Seak and all of her mama bears and daddy bears and the mom and dad army that are out there making a difference for our next generation. Somebody has to stand up for these little people. We need to reclaim our place as, the mentors, the voices of reason, the people that protect our children, not exploit them or give in to their, but I want a cookie. You wouldn't just hand them the cookie jar, right?
But I see our grandkids looking for guidance. Yes. Even though sometimes you say no to them, yes, they kind of they question it.
And instead of they find out where the boundaries are.
Right.
So they push you.
We can see it in them.
Care enough to push back.
Right.
Do you care enough to hold this line to protect me?
Yeah.
Anyway, now you're going to get me fired up. All right. Thank you so much to all of our awesome listeners and viewers. If you want to go back and watch any portion of this, go to YouTube, Gunstreamer, any place you find videos. Be sure you click the subscribe and notification, because that tells the algorithms that this information, this content, these subject matter experts are important to you. If you want to listen to the audio only version, go to GunFreedomRadio.com. Click the on demand tab and
Binge listens to your heart content, darling.
Oh, I like that. All right. And if you want to see photos and bios and links to all the work that all of our guests, including Seak Smith, have, click the guest tab. It's a growing database. And when you spend time there, we don't hate that. All right. Until next time, please pray for this nation. Pray for this world.
Pray for our children.
Pray for our children. Pray for our leaders. Those that are doing the right things.
They're
and
not
those that are
leaders,
doing the
Cheryl.
wrong
Remember,
thing.
why do you say that? They're not leaders. They're representatives that think they're leaders.
Okay. But I mean, people placed in positions of leadership.
If a Martian came down and said,
Even if we're
take-
not talking elected politician, people who are placed in
okay,
positions of leadership.
okay, that
let's
could,
pray for them.
but if a Martian came down and said, take me to your leader, I'd say, you mean representatives?
Right.
Because leaders, but you're right. There are some people that lead. Those are usually the ones that are volunteer or very, just good people.
There's some that are falling into the wrong path. So let's pray for them. Especially the ones we are frustrated with, right?
Yeah, many of them.
So, all right. Until next time, be good to each other. Have a great week, and God bless.
Protect your children.